Thank you for joining me for week 7 of A Little Birdie Told Me. We are going to be establishing our corners and putting those wool applique pieces on today. It's kind of fun, so we're really building the background. The first thing you want to do, your piece is probably starting to pucker a little bit because we've done a lot of stitching in the center and on the sides. So sort of lay your piece out as flat as you can. An inch away from the top piece of the Oya, I just put a piece of tape. Because my edges now aren't as even as they were before. And you do want to kind of put a final piece on it. Mine was 18.5. So what I did was I put tape on all 4 sides, and then I just kept repositioning the tape and measuring at the same time. I took my long ruler, made sure I was like 18.5 inches from here to the other piece of tape and sideways, and just keep moving your tape until you're satisfied that you've got a square, an 18.5 inch square. 19 is fine too. It doesn't have to be 18 inch and a half. It just has to measure on both sides. We're gonna start here. So when you're making your corner, just make sure that your flower is sort of pointing towards the corner. The next thing we're gonna do is about 1/4 inch away from the top of this flower, go ahead and applique that other dot, those other 4 dots, and then run your blanket stitch around that too with your C thread, I believe it is, the matching one. And then come back, and then I'll show you what to do on those corners and where we're gonna place those appliques. So once you have your dot on, you're going to take the left and the right biggest applique pieces of this tulip and pin them in place, again, 1/4 inch above that circle, far enough apart because we're going to cut the wool and then put some fabric in the background. So I'd say this is probably 1.5 inches apart. The tips are either at or kind of on the tape line. That's okay as long as you have at least 1/4 inch out here. Just to give you a guideline, I measured from the tip of the flower to here about 5 3/4 inch. It was pretty close all the way around. It's not perfect, but it's a pillow, and it's not going to lay flat. You don't have to be quite as accurate as if you were quilting in this. You just want to make sure that if you look at it, you're eyeing it up and it looks even and symmetrical, it's going to be good enough. Take thread E, which is the thread that you did the little lace around the Oya pieces, or whatever. This is just what I'm using, and if you bought a kit from me, this is what you'll have thread for. And I wanted to sort of match the thread. I didn't want to go for a big contrast here. I'm just matching the thread really to the background, a little bit darker. And what we're going to do is just a little running stitch and get that as close to the edge as you can, because what we're going to do is cut the wool. Make sure you're doing this not with cotton, because obviously the edges will fray. This is a wool applique method where you don't need to turn anything under. And as close to the edge as you can get, just do like 3 little running stitches as close together as you can. I'm getting a little farther away from the edge than I want to, so I'm going to go back. Right, and then just work that all the way around all of the pieces. And then once you get those 2 sewn on, you can place the left and right medium-sized pieces, pin those in place, stitch them just like this, and then the little teardrop shapes, just sort of place them, eye everything up, and nothing's going to match perfectly because this is all just sort of, very handcrafted, and it's a cool way to work. It's an organic way to work without having to measure everything and, be so precise. It's more interesting if it is just that slightly off. Kind of adds that interest to the eye. So just eye all this stuff up. Here I'm about 1/2 inch away. Just make sure that these are sort of facing the same way. These are going out towards that second flower. And then incidentally, when you're stitching them, just end it after each one. In other words, don't carry it across, because we're going to cut that anyway, and you may cut that thread, and then these may loosen up. So just every single piece just gets a starting knot and a beginning knot. Okay, and then come back and we're going to go ahead and cut the shapes out, which is actually the fun part. Okay, so then once you get your pieces sewn on, and you can see it's not perfect, this one's a little closer. It doesn't really matter. We're going to fill all this with embroidery in the next 2 weeks, so it's going to look balanced by the time it's all said and done. But anyway, once you get these on, what you're going to do is you're going to cut just the brown. Don't cut the background on these for now. These are really sharp scissors from Karen K. Buckley. They're the perfect scissors. They're serrated. And they've got a nice sharp little point where you can just really get in there. So what you're going to do is just start to clip the top layer of that wool until you can get the point of your scissor in. And then just start clipping along that stitching line. Just take it really slow here and be sure not to clip, you know, the actual thread that you've stitched with. And you want this line to be pretty skinny. You want to cut as much out as you can so that we can see the background fabric behind there. So, and then, you know, just cut the bulk of it away, work on it, just cut it all out. And, you know, if you get to a spot, say it's all cut out, you get to a spot where it's maybe not even, you can just kind of go in and just trim it and make it nice and flat. So cut as much as you can out of the center of here. Believe it or not, we're going to cut just a little bit out of the center of here. Just cut as much as you can. It's going to be just a little line of background that you'll see, but the contrast is good, so you'll be able to see through that. And then here too. So cut all of those out, and then we'll cut a few sections of the background fabric. Okay, yay, and then once you have all of the pieces hollowed out, we're going to cut into the background section, which seems a little scary, but it's not too bad once you get going. And again, just 1/8 of an inch. You just want to see that teeny tiny little background peek through. So we're sort of layering like how you would do a mola. Cutting away to reveal the layers underneath, right? And so then you're going to just cut those two out. And you know, I didn't provide a template for the centerpiece. I kind of spaced it, but you're basically just drawing a canoe shape out of a piece of paper. This is a sticky backed interfacing, but you can even just do a piece of paper, piece of muslin, whatever your template is to be, and just place it in the center. Make sure that you've got, you know, some space around, centered as best you can. Pin it in place, and then get your scissors in there and just cut right on the edge of that so that you'll have an opening in the middle and then the two openings here. So your center of your tulip, my first pillow I did the polka dot fabric. In this case I really love this fabric, so I chose this for the center. I took the cutout, put it on the top of my fabric, and just did a simple 1/4 of an inch cutout around that. And then this will lie right underneath here. And if you have fabric that can be fussy cut, that's kind of fun too, to put something symmetrical or whatever in the center. And then on the sides, here's my floral fabric that, oh, this goes on this side, right? And so that gets tucked under as well. And then same on the other side. So you'll tuck these under, pin them in place, and then stitch them. Now this fabric, of course, is a little floppy, and it'll move on you a little bit. So I just pinned it here, and I'll show you this. I'll start the center one here in a minute. But you can also stabilize this fabric just by putting on any sort of clothing stabilizer or quilting stabilizer or whatever, just a one-sided fusible, just to get those not to move around so much. But that's just personal preference. The first one I did it, and this one I just sort of blew it off. I guess I was probably too lazy to even fuse the stabilizer. Classic. So back here, once it's centered and I know I'm going to be able to get a good stitch line, I just take a pin, hold it in place at the top and the bottom. Yeah. And then just take sewing thread that matches the background, or that blends with the background. Oh, that didn't work so good. Hang on a sec. You can pin it from the front too if you want to. Like I said, this fabric is going to move like crazy on you, so there. And just like an applique stitch, you're going to come up from the back. That'll happen too. Just worry about that when you get there. As long as you can kind of keep flattening it out and manipulating it and holding it just in the vicinity that you're stitching. That's really all you need to worry about. The rest of it will move, but you can straighten it back out. I'll show you what I mean. and insert the needle directly into the fabric along the side of the wool. Come up about 1/8 of an inch and then just pierce the side of the wool. We're going to be putting a decorative whip stitch on here, so even if you can see the thread a little bit, it's not a big deal. And back out. Alright, and you're going to do the same thing, just same thread, same thing with the side pieces. And once you get that stitched in, then we'll do the decorative embroidery. Alright, so once you get that done, you'll have your reverse applique mola pieces done. And then the last thing we're going to do for this week, we'll keep it really easy, that way if you're playing catch up, you can get up to this point, because the next 2 weeks are going to be pretty intense embroidery in here. So just going to take that same thread E, and we're just going to make little lines, little whip stitch lines. So come up just at the edge of the brown there, every 1/8 of an inch. Insert your needle directly across to where you're coming out, but into the background fabric, over the camel color, or whatever your background color is, into the background fabric only. And then again, just come up 1/8 of an inch away, right at the outer part, the first cutaway part. Okay, directly across. And then just keep working until both of these are filled in. And you're going to work the same thing, just little 1/8 of an inch marks here. So it'll look like, I did this one already. When you're done with it, it'll look like this. And then your whole piece will look like this. So I know it's a really short week this week. But it seems like we got a lot done because we've really filled out the core of the background. Here are the pictures of people who have been following along and stitching along that they've sent in this week. I will leave you with that. Thank you again so much for joining me, and we will see you next week for layered embroidery. I can't wait.